Hello everybody, my name is Fabio Antoniali. I am a researcher professor at École Centrale Lyon, and I'm here today accompanied my colleague and professor emeritus at École Centrale Supélec, Madame Danielle Attias. And we are here today to present to you our discussion paper entitled Designing and Implementing Citizen-Based Urban Mobility Projects. New challenges to the automotive industry in the context of the post-pandemic and climate change. This paper has been co-authored by myself, Professor Sylvie Mirabeau-Nardel, and Professor Danielle Attias. So in this slide, you can see the presentation outline of our paper. We'll start talking about our introduction and the research objective of this present work. After, we will discuss a little bit in details about the citizen integration in urban policy and decision making. Later, the impacts of the citizen-centric mobility on the automotive industry, and we will finish with our concluding remarks. So, as for an introductory part, we know that for the past decades, most urban mobility projects have been implemented in a top-down approach, meaning that the state and the decision makers in cities, in partnership with the public transport operators, have been deciding and implementing the mobility projects, while the citizens didn't have a chance to give their opinion about the projects being implemented. However, for the past recent years, there has been some motivators to change that, in a sense that citizens are becoming more aware and being more engaged in such mobility projects. The first motive is the P2P transport solutions, that is peer-to-peer transport, such as Uber and other ride-sharing platforms, as well as the emergence of several mobility apps as a service schemes, has been motivating citizens to take action and to take part in their mobility choices. In parallel with that, there has been increased environmental concerns, so citizens are more aware of their impact in the carbon footprint and in their emissions, thus prompting a solution towards greener transport alternatives. And of course, we cannot neglect the effects of COVID on the mobility behavior of people, meaning that with the pandemic, there has been a significant decrease in public transport demand in favor of individual mobility, such as the private cars, but also bicycles and other individual approaches. In this sense, we've been observing that citizen participation is becoming stronger, meaning that the mobility projects being implemented are no longer majorly based on a top-down approach. We are now starting to see a bottom-up perspective in which citizens and local communities are taking action in favor of more sustainable and durable mobility solutions. With this in mind, we propose in this discussion paper the following objective: is to discuss how the relations between urban mobility policymakers and citizens are evolving and which effects on the automotive industry are to be expected. Regarding the second point in our presentation, which is the citizen integration in urban policy decision making, we show you here in this slide a model proposed by the EAP2, in which is a spectrum of citizen participation in mobility projects. As you can see here, this spectrum is divided in 5 levels, starting with the most basic one, which is to inform the citizens of the mobility projects. Basically here is just to provide information to help people understand about these problems. This can be done via events, hearings, open houses. The second level would be consult the public or the citizens. There is get feedback from the citizens and other involved stakeholders, which can be done via surveys, focus groups, or even public hearings. Next comes the step of involving the population in the public projects. And here the idea is really to work together with citizens and the other stakeholders. This can be done via workshops, deliberative opinion pools, or even open space meetings. The next step would be to collaborate with those people, meaning develop the alternatives with the citizens and other involved stakeholders, which can be done with future research workshops, citizen juries, and advisory committees. And finally, the most complete integration level would be to empower the population, putting the decision-making in the hands of the citizens and other stakeholders, which can be done via delegated decisions and referendums. In this regard, we elaborated here a quick diagram to show you the different levels of projects and citizen integration. As you can see here, we have the top-down approach, in which is the traditional projects based from the government, and then on the other end of the spectrum, as you can see here in green, we have the citizen-based projects, which comes from this bottom-up approach. In the middle, we have the projects with citizens' participation. Based on the model I showed you on the previous slide, here we can see some examples for the three levels. Government-based projects. For example, we can mention here New York, which implemented a ban from cars in the Central Park area. We can also mention here Paris, which proposed a reduction of car lanes in favor of bike lanes. Danielle will tell you more a little bit later. Those are projects which are proposed by the government, and the citizens don't really have a say on that. Then we have the intermediate level, which are projects with citizens' participation. Here I show you three big European projects which were proposed and funded by the European Commissions. We have Civitas Elan, the Energy Cities project called Citizen, and the Challenge project. Each of those projects were carried out in several European cities, and each of them proposed and developed different innovative solutions for urban mobility projects involving citizens' participations on different levels of the model I showed you before, which is the inform, consult, involve, and empower. And at last, on the other end of the spectrum, we have the real citizen-based projects. Here, those projects are not really institutionalized, they are extremely informal, so it's very hard to take into account in form of academic material. However, I highlight to you here a very famous architect and urbanist, which is called Michael Colville Anderson, and he has proposed a TV show called Life-Sized City, in which he visits many cities across the planet to show some of those citizen-based projects. I just give you here two examples. The first one is when he visited the city of Tel Aviv in Israel, in which the citizens proposed local urban mobility solutions to support people in need in specific neighborhoods of the city. Next, he visited the city of Tokyo, in which small communities in neighborhood-based solutions, they propose different alternatives as well to improve local mobility for the citizens.
To continue our reflection, here is a table where we see in Europe cities how users move. We compare 6 cities in Europe: Rome, Barcelona, Berlin, London, Paris, Copenhagen. The chairs of the modes of transport are colored red for cars, blue for public transport, green for walking, and green for bicycle. The most important fact is Copenhagen, with more 40% of bicycle part. A point to remind, For Paris, currently, the part of the bicycle is about 6%. You see in this slide 2%, but the situation is 2 years ago. And what was the new situation in Paris? Because is the deployment policies of the bicycle lanes. The division of public transport is almost the same in the cities. The important differences are the use of the car, 60% in Rome, but only 25% in Paris. For other cities, the choice is often between walking and cycling. For example, in Copenhagen, in Barcelona, and of course in Paris. This is a very interesting experience in Luxembourg in Europe and Dunkerque in France. The government of mobility had decided to offer the free public transport. In Luxembourg, the public operator, Mobility Central, says 2 years ago, Luxembourg is proud to be the first country in the world to offer free public transport in the whole country to all travelers. The transportation concerns bus, train and funicular. The users are resident, non-resident, for example, tourists and cross-border workers. And it's interesting because the cross-border workers are 200,000 people per day. For this situation, for this free service, the Luxembourg invested for 1 million euro. And the objective is a multimodal revolution strategy. In Dunkerque, in France, we have the same situation, but not the same objectives. The goals are to promote the mobility of the most precarious population, to revitalize city center, for example, for the shopping, for the restaurant, the bar, to reduce the place of cars, and above all, to give back purchasing power. Users have sold their cars, left their parking place, and thus this is for them an additional revenue. But this choice will have a significant impact on the automotive industry.
So, continuing our topics here, as Danielle said, the automotive industry is really going to be affected by all these changes and by this citizen empowerment in terms of their mobility. And what would be their need now? They need to adapt to these new circumstances and to these new constraints imposed by the market. For instance, they should try to find a balance between their economic sustainability, the newer environmental regulations, and of course, the citizen satisfactions. With that, there has been an urge to redefine their product range, meaning to offer a combined product service system approach, or even a modular product service system, MPSS, giving more technological innovations and customized services to their clients. So the idea would be selling the usage, selling mobility options instead of simply selling cars. For that, the automotive industry is now starting to foster newer partnerships and open innovation practices with different stakeholders. And they are doing this by 3 big ways. First of all, investments in shared mobility, vehicle electrification, and vehicle automation. The strategic alliances to accomplish these goals are mainly being done with IT companies and tech giants such as Google, Uber, Waymo, and etc. Many startup companies, as we can see here in Europe with the autonomous shuttles, we have Navia, EasyMile, which are both French-based startups. And of course, many partnerships with the telecom industry, giving the importance of 4G and 5G to the proper working of those services. So in this next slide, you can see here one of the biggest players in the automotive industry, For example, you can see here in blue, we have GM and their newer partnerships, acquisitions, investments, and of course some of their subsidiaries, which comes from all different areas of many different industries. The same goes for Ford, as you can see here, many different partnerships from IT, tech companies, of course telecoms, and the same goes for Daimler and all the other big manufacturers we can see here in this slide. So going even further here in this concept of the adaptation of the automotive industry, there has been a recent publication, as you can see here in green, by Miskolkis, Fodes, Munkaski, and Jasperhirni. Sorry for my pronunciation. Those authors, they have proposed prospective studies in which they analyzed 52 scenarios for urban mobility. And the main outcomes of their studies shows that the big trends are indeed the electrification, the automation, and the shared mobility, as previously shown in the other slides. The author says that for vehicle electrification, the advances has been slow but steady, meaning there has been several issues to be overcome, such as opposition from customers, from governments and the industry itself, but also the relevance and the important growth of startup companies, such as Transition One, Wattpark, and Drev, which are helping boost this transition towards a greener transportation. On the other hand, for automation, the author says that they are being led by newcomers, tech giants and startups, meaning that incumbent OEMs are not really making headlines when it comes to vehicular automation. The big companies such as Tesla, Waymo, which are the tech giants, and the startups, as I mentioned, Navia, Easy Miles, and of course we have the American Optimus Ride, we have Zotz, Nauto, etc., are the ones pushing the technology forward. And by doing that, the main focus is not on the individual car, but on shared mobility and public transport offerings. As a conclusion to our discussion paper, we can see 4 big elements. The first one is that the current urban mobility is indeed being called into question. Why? Because first, citizens are eager to take action in mobility plans, so we are now observing much more elements of bottom-up approaches in citizen mobility behavior. Why? Because they are demanding faster, they are demanding more ecological, comfortable and inexpensive mobility solutions, which is prompting the automotive industry to adapt. They are now more constrained and pressured than ever, and in order to keep up with those new challenges, they need to be agile and reinvent their future strategy. Why? To address these new challenges with connected services, which at the same time must add value to the customer. And of course, we cannot neglect the post-pandemic context that we are in which is being acting as a catalyst to potentialize all those changes, both from the citizen and the industry side. And it's also prompting an urban space reconfiguration with citizen-based mobility solutions becoming more and more prominent, and concluding with greater focus between these mobility challenges we are seeing now and the even growing pressures of climate change and more sustainable and durable mobility solutions. So this is what we had to present for you today. We thank you very much for your time and for your attention, and we are now open for your questions.